Diablo 4 has some of the best world building I've ever seen in recent years. Or at least that's what I want to say, but the harsh reality is that they stopped building their world before achieving greatness. I know how arrogant it sounds. Some idiot in the vastness of the internet claims to know more about Diablo than Blizzard. However, I wouldn't make this video unless I'm absolutely sure. Blizzard got lost in their endless search for Mephisto. For example, the map exists in a tiresome state without even arousing a spark of curiosity. They all look different, but each biome just feels the same. Even though Diablo 4 has been heavily criticized in the past, I don't regret spending $70 on it. I played around 100 hours with my friends and had fun, I won't deny that. Back then, the game didn't have an exciting endgame. I loved running nightmare dungeons, but found Helltides horrible. The game has improved by now, at least the Steam charts show that players are currently more than satisfied and stick way longer in Sanctuary. It remains to be seen if Blizzard can keep the momentum and improve on it in the next season or even with the DLC. In this video, however, we focus more on the world building aspect and how this could have been integrated into the gameplay. Before we start, a short summary of the prologue. A dark mage named Elias summons Lilith to the world of Sanctuary in hopes that she will bring salvation to the human world. Lost in the middle of the wilderness, we, the player, follow a ghostly creature to a village. Already under the influence of Lilith, our kindness is immediately exploited by the villagers. With support, we manage to free ourselves, but every help comes too late. Let's go back to Lilith, who is brought back to our world from exile via a forbidden ritual. Elias takes her hand and asks her to save our pathetic lives. That is his goal, no matter the cost. At this point, the player doesn't know that hell is reforming and plans an invasion. But Elias does. Lilith takes his hand, implying that she will most likely support him, however, she doesn't answer his request yet. Let's begin with a somewhat unfair question. What does Lilith want to achieve? What drives her? What does she fear? Everyone who said she wants to take Mephisto's power is unfortunately wrong, or not entirely wrong. Blizzard just happened to put all their focus on this specific desire, just one point in the vastness of the entire world and story. Let's put it in a way. Absorbing Mephisto is part of her plan, yes, part of her grand vision to reform Sanctuary. Now, in order to understand what she wants, you have to go back. Elias asks her to save Sanctuary, the place she and Inarius created. At this time, one can only speculate. Lilith's answer to this question comes later, in a rather brutal setting. Right now, she can't answer, because she has no idea how much Sanctuary has changed or what is actually needed. Elias wants to save humanity at all cost. Presumably, this might include the weak who would have died long ago without a protective society, but we don't know for sure. He does not provide an answer. In response to Elias' religious claim that Lilith would save humanity, Lilith later replies this.
If we are to be saved, it will be by your hand.
I have not come to save, but to empower. In my shadow, the strong will oppose the might of hell itself.
She did not come to save humanity, but to empower them. Lilith proposes an artificial selection. She claims that humans have become too weak and wants to change this. The evidence that led her to this conclusion can be found in the second cutscene. Normal people can no longer even stand near her without completely losing their minds. They beat the priest mercilessly to death without even shedding a tear of remorse. Lilith did not force them. They lost their mind and did everything out of their own free will. She realizes what her children have withered into, and with hell coming, she has no option but to empower the people with a radical method. Why does she want Mephisto? The simple answer is that she wants to weaken hell and improve her position at the same time. In theory, Mephisto's power gives her a better chance of protecting herself. Whether she wants Mephisto's power for a selfish reason, so that she can rule Sanctuary forever, Or she wants to use it selflessly to help us turn Sanctuary into a place of peace, removed from the eternal conflict. It doesn't really matter. Maybe it's somewhere in between and she wants Sanctuary to flourish, but also as a means of defense. It may well be that she even sees us as a personal army that will ultimately destroy heaven and hell in equal measures. What exactly fuels her ideology is crucial, but in this video I am not interested in theorizing about that. Lilith is aware that she has no chance against the combined power of hell. Humans were once so strong before Inarius weakened them with the Worldstone. Now that the Worldstone was destroyed, humans can regain their lost strength, but only slowly with each new generation. She wants to empower people so that they can defend Sanctuary against hell on their own. But that's the interesting part. To empower, what does that mean? Well, she's talking more or less about artificial selection, if you want me to put it kindly. To understand what empowering means, we first need to delve a little into the lore of Diablo. My knowledge in this area is limited, but basically Lilith and Inarius were fed up with being part of this internal conflict and stole the Worldstone to create Sanctuary. Things remained peaceful, but it was only a matter of time before heaven and hell found the hidden location. The children of Lilith and Inarius possess a strength that was unseen until then, a true threat to heaven and hell that could break the balance. Concerned and also perhaps afraid, Inarius used the Worldstone to weaken the Nephilim with each generation. A mighty Nephilim, in theory, was itself a horrible threat even to the great evils. Their strength came from the union of angelic and demonic blood. Angels and demons are said to have originally been one creature that split. Out of those two creatures, one day arose heaven and hell, as well as the 5 archangels and the 7 evils. Humans are so powerful because they are closer to the original being than demons or angels and can therefore also use the powers of heaven and hell. When a demon dies, its soul and demonic essence gather in hell and it practically respawns. That's also the reason why great evils are locked up in soulstones, because it makes no sense to kill them multiple times. But even the soulstone can't keep the corrupting power inside. So if you are near it, a shuddering whisper will drive you mad until you completely succumb to the power of whoever is inside and might sacrifice yourself to free it. The same thing happens with the angels, if I remember correctly. I don't know if they've ever been imprisoned in a soulstone, but in theory it should work. When angels die, they lose their personality. So they are not reborn as the same being, unlike demons. They only possess the same essence that becomes a new person. For an archangel, death is permanent. He will no longer remember his previous life, unlike the demons. What I want to say with this history lesson is that humans are so weak because we have too little demonic essence as well as angelic essence. So when Lilith speaks of empowering, she wants to strengthen or increase the amount of essence in the human body. I would argue that this is not speculation, but a fact based on the lore. And if we take a closer look at this perspective, then countless new doors open. What are the possibilities that society could take to save itself from destruction? Well, they could gain new strength by joining forces with another superpower. But after the events of Part 3, in which the angels narrowly escaped total destruction, I don't think high heavens are open to such a proposal. The angels are also undecided among themselves as to whether they should destroy the humans or let them live. Empowerment and artificial selection. The first and probably quickest but also most radical idea could be to isolate the essence of a living being and forcefully channel it into another living creature. It would be an artificial, perhaps subsequent rebirth of the human into a new higher being, the Nephilim. Now, the idea of leaving your limiting flesh behind to become a more perfect being is an interesting theme the game could follow. The world of Diablo is incredibly deadly and fucked up. At any moment demons could reduce your village to ashes, so going under the protection of Lilith or Inarius doesn't seem like a bad idea. Although you might become a sacrificial offering to greater purpose. Only if you're too weak, don't get me wrong. However, I think that Elias and Lilith would preferably use enemy forces for their experiments to weaken the hostile faction at the same time. After all, they need the common people to farm resources and food, create weapons, and spread or expand their sphere of influence, and to do a lot of other things. The common people might potentially be utilized to conduct surveillance on the Church of Light. You can't possibly surveil every single person that enters your city. Using your own manpower for experiments would jeopardize Lilith's position, as each individual is vital in this circumstance. This could lead to a fierce confrontation. Ambassadors spreading the word of both Lilith and Inarius roam the lands, assassinating each other's in city. Maybe the Church of Light executes traitors of humanity in the middle of the town to scare the common folk. How could they follow Lilith's enticing words and decline the light and blessing of their Lord Inarius, their savior who promised guidance into the peaceful heavens and heal all diseases? All of this would be background immersion to quickly show the player which respective faction governs the city. If we need, we could easily implement those elements into a crucial quest based on the story and side we are on. Wars, espionage, assassins, rescue missions and other events. Maybe even sabotaging crucial points in the city. They would definitely fit into the setting. It's cruel, dark, bloody and absolutely brutal. The created Nephilim within Lilith's faction are revered as saints or angel-like beings who wage war for humans. Lilith, in her circles, would be close to a godlike figure who watches over us forever. However, essence have a certain counter value, or disadvantage, or side effect, if you might call it that. To become a Nephilim, both energy must be in balance. A demon is only made of demonic essence, just as an angel is only formed from light or angelic essence. The Nephilim is a balance between two. So, what happens if the transformation of a Nephilim fails? Well, you could argue about the question, maybe something like that isn't even possible in the world of Diablo. One could also question whether it's even possible to isolate essence in a soulstone and press it into a foreign body. Do soulstones still exist at all, or what new methods have to be developed? Would your body accept or reject the foreign essence? It has never really been done on a more massive scale in Diablo. Perhaps a man explodes when he cannot hold or control the clashing powers of heaven and hell in his mortal body. Perhaps we need to remodel the human body entirely. The foreign essence could also destroy their mind. What happens if they get too much essence from one side? Do the attributes of the respective race intensify? Does the human body suddenly mutate into a demon until the mind resembles that of a wild carnivorous monster? What happens to the counterpart? When a warrior gets too much of the angelic essence, does his body mutate? Do holy glowing wings develop on his back? Maybe his face smells like wax, as angels do not have a real face? Perhaps one of the virtues that angels represent in the high heavens, and that is strongest in the test subject, becomes more pronounced. A warrior could suddenly fight for the right of this world and protect the weak or inspire and lead all among them for a glorious future. It might be similar to Captain America's Super Serum, where all your traits get amplified. Questions upon questions to which we will never get an answer. Maybe. But maybe we've already received them and I never realized it. One could argue that it's similar to Leah's transformation into Diablo in the third game. However, I believe it's not the same thing, as nothing of her previous identity remains after the transformation. This is obviously not the only method. I don't know if something like this has ever been done before in Diablo. I wouldn't be surprised. Anyone who has watched Dune probably knows where I'm going to. The Bene Gesserit collect and made genetic material specifically to create an exalt being. The one who sees the future and past to guide humanity on a golden path. With all the conflict and suffering in Sanctuary, I could well imagine the creation of such a sect, possibly worshipping Lilith and living in the shadows, waiting for the Chosen One to save them all. Maybe he will appear, maybe he won't. Perhaps they first want to create a super being that will ensure the survival of mankind until they are discovered by Elias and contribute to the grand plan to save the world under Lilith. Lilith throws a new worldview at the collapsing world, a very drastic one if you ask me. However, you have to remember that she saw with her own eyes what a weak race we have withered into. She can't even stand near us or we will completely lose our minds. Artificial selection, the weak sacrifice themselves for the greater will in order to win the holy war against hell. Only in this way can the remnants of Sanctuary be transformed into a paradise where one no longer has to live in fear and suffering. Perhaps Lilith, as the only immortal being in Sanctuary, will claim her right as the ruler under the disguise to grant eternal peace. Maybe she even starts looking how to become a Nephilim-like being herself. Sadly, we will never see any of this as Lilith is already dead. Is her plan moral? Should we join her in the future? I don't think that matters. Why should we apply morals from our world to Diablo? Their world is so dark, cruel and fucked up that it would be really hard to convince anyone who lives there not to put their hope in Lilith or Inario's hands. She has a plan that could lead to victory if we don't interfere. Unfortunately, there's nothing else humanity can rely on. Brutal times like those in Sanctuary require a strong leader. Therefore, a hierarchy will undoubtedly emerge with Lilith at the top. Who other than the player and perhaps Inarios has enough power to potentially establish such a position and rival it? Lilith has resources, offers protection from the coming inferno, and a higher purpose worth fighting for if the people are willing to follow. The only alternative would be the church, where you unknowingly agree to march towards certain death. Ambassadors will spread Lilith's word. However, her faction should be significantly smaller and weaker than the Church of Lights for one simple reason. Lilith has only recently returned to our world, so it's obvious that her influence is smaller, especially when Inario's faction tries to suppress her. What can we, as the player, realistically do? The church is fucked. Everyone believes Inarios will lead them to salvation. No one can prove that he's just using people for selfish ends to ascend to heaven again. The church is doomed from the start, but not one person in Sanctuary knows it. If we decide to kill Inarios, his demise will only reinforce the very beliefs that caused the people of the church to run to their death on their own. We as the player can do nothing but watch. Perhaps a reform is possible after Inarios dies in hell, but the basic belief to reach heaven by killing Lilith will not disappear for the time being. All those who follow him long for the peace that heaven supposedly gives. They don't want to believe that things could turn out differently and that angels' promise will be broken, that angels can lie. He healed their wounds. They look up to him. He is this shining bright star. How could they ever doubt him? Even the power of the Nephilim can't tear down the might of their own belief, unless we slaughter them all. All of them probably say something like, Inarios, our Lord, died trying to selflessly bring us salvation. Who would we be if we simply turned around and left his sacrifice in place? How could we ever step under the light of the sun again? Many knights probably have these thoughts, which makes change impossible even now that Inario is dead. We are just a small group of idiots messing with the power of Sanctuary, weakening humanity even further. We are just the protagonist. That's why the game gives us plot armor and nothing really matters. Yes, Lilith's plan sounds brutal, but when you think about it, what else can humanity do? At the end of the game, not only is the church practically destroyed, but we've also completely wiped out Lilith's forces. Lilith and Inarios are no longer alive, until they respawn, at least. Instead of preventing anything, we have only further weakened Sanctuary's forces and made an invasion even easier. The church was wiped out, and how many humans did we kill that could have aided us in the coming war? An invasion of hell is imminent, and there's an imprisoned Mephisto somewhere walking around, just waiting for his freedom to consume the lands. Maybe he's already starting his own sect or religion to build up his forces. Hell alone doesn't seem to be able to destroy heavens, but with Sanctuary at its side, it's a different story. How will humanity survive this crisis? We are shattered, like a pile of glass that tries to fight three beings whose power can destroy the world. Their forces so enormous that they seem like an endless sea. How does Blizzard imagine that humanity can stand up to this? Plot armor! Of course it's plot armor. What else could it be? We will just be the next motherfucker again who can effortlessly fight all the 7 evils at the same time. It doesn't even matter what happens. There's no satisfying solution, and how could there be? After all, this is a mindless hack and slay game. My suggestion would have been to give the player more choices and provide multiple endings. Unlike the old titles, there simply isn't a clear evil that humanity unites against. Lilith is not Diablo, and we shouldn't treat her the same way. In Diablo 3, we only had one choice. We fought off Hell's invasion in every act, and in the end, we even saved heaven from its certain demise. If we fail, everything is lost. In Diablo 4, on the other hand, society is divided. The humans under Lilith are preparing to move against Hell, and the church wants to launch its own societal crusade. There's no good side. The church is fucked. Lilith wants to kill half of humanity, and we just kill both sides because we don't even bother to suggest a plan. Different endings would have allowed more world building and a gripping story. However, we are talking about the Diablo game here. Blizzard planned this game with a DLC in mind, I'm sure about that. So different endings are unfortunately not feasible. Whether we join Lilith or kill her makes a huge difference. You can't just start the story after the game from a new point of view. Diablo 4 unfortunately focused so much on Lilith's desire to get a hand on Mephisto and completely neglects our world building. She loses troops left and right until eventually nobody is left. The Eggman criticized the introduction of Hell in this video, as the place is hardly any different from the overworld. We launch an invasion into the depths of Hell where the most dangerous and powerful creatures should exist, but somehow we still fight the same enemies as in the first act of the game. And he's right, at least partially. I would go so far as to say that the whole setting doesn't work. How can it be that we walk into Hell without any problems? There's a really great cutscene, don't get me wrong, it looks incredible, but why do we miss the entire battle between humanity and Hell? Are you really telling me Mephisto doesn't have a fortress that protects him when he is weakened? There are no big bridges supported by a 100-meter tall demon, and to get across the chasm we have to stretch ropes and protect them, or big machines made by humans to bring down walls. There are no monstrosities covering the sky. Where is the different ecosystem that we need to survive in with deadly traps? It's just Sanctuary in red with several cliffs. Yes, I know you are fighting a giant monster in an arena. I would have liked to see more of an invasion that fails in the end because Inarius dies in front of his followers. For example, when all humans fall into panic, Brava encourages everyone that the Lord has fought for our redemption, and they should keep fighting, but in the end, the army is not enough. In the cutscene, Inarius dies and the demons overrun the entire army in seconds. It's kind of sad that we miss everything. Especially the final battle against Lilith is disappointing if you look at it from a story perspective. The fight looks great, both visually and musically. But what exactly is at stakes? We arrived before Lilith and got Mephisto out of Hell. Or let's say Mephisto made sure Lilith couldn't pursue him any further. So what are we fighting for, if you don't mind me asking? Sure, we fight to survive, but that applies to practically every enemy in the game, whether beetles or world eaters. If the only motivation is to survive and nothing else, that's just terrible. Perhaps you could make an argument that our friends die when we lose, but did we even really know them? What's the point of beating someone who's already weakened? If we lose, Lilith will come back to Sanctuary, and then what? What does she have left in Sanctuary? We killed Elias and probably wiped out all her forces. Inarius also stabbed her, which she probably has to recover from first. We've honestly been chasing her the whole game, just so we could fight her at her weakest point. All her plans are already ruined, as she can't get Mephisto any longer. If we win, she will just respawn anyway, and if we lose, she has no forces left in Sanctuary and also has to recover by hiding. At this point, Mephisto is a bigger threat that we will have to deal with. He's something Lilith fears, and she probably won't show her face the moment he comes out. The outcome of this fight doesn't matter. We fight because we don't want to die. That's all. Sadly, we also skillfully ignore the arguments that she throws at us. Lilith has a plan to save Sanctuary, but we don't. Still, Loroth acts like he knows the way. Trust me, bro. Everything will be fine. Somehow. I'm telling you my plan because I don't have one. It's even worse in my eyes than the final battle in Diablo 3, where not only the fate of heaven is at stake, but Leia's life as well. She was betrayed by her mother and used as a vessel so that her father Diablo could return. Not only do we want to defeat Diablo, but we also want to save Leia if possible. I know she wasn't the greatest character, but being a vessel forever is probably a fate far worse than death. Who knows what Diablo and the other evils will do to her soul? A life of torture is not pleasant, and 6 of the greatest evil have nothing to do right now because Diablo remains in control as he obliterates the heavens. The same goes for Durael. Heaven is his home, and he wants to defend it at all costs, even if he took his own immortality to travel to Sanctuary. Not only do we have a personal reason to fight, but emotional weight is attached to each character. The connection between characters is the most important thing. Granted, it's not the best in Diablo either, but in Diablo 4 we have no connection at all. I don't care about the little girl or Lorath, and the church just ignored us. Donan is an interesting character, but he only ends up fighting because the game says it's the right thing to do, and maybe out of revenge to some degree. What exactly is our motivation there? Diablo is at least a real threat. Losing means more than just the destruction of all worlds because our friends suffer a terrible fate or losing their homes completely. He is at his strongest, whereas Lilith is at her weakest. The combat in Diablo 4 is pretty forgettable from a narrative perspective because we just follow Lorath instructions who doesn't have the slightest idea what's actually going on. We only ever chase after Lilith's troops and weaken them further. She does nothing against it until Lilith ends up fighting us, completely isolated and alone. A fight that is completely irrelevant and where nothing is at stakes. Bravo, Blizzard! I think if we had joined Lilith, it would have been a lot more interesting, but hey, here we are. Shortly before Elias dies, there's a conversation between him and Lorath.
Oh, Elias. Was all this worth it then? Truly?
I brought Lilith to Sanctuary, a thing no one thought possible. And when hell rises to sweep across this world, I should be there beside her, ready to push it back. You left me alone to cross the lines you would dare not attempt, and you have nothing to show for it. You are nothing but a wasted life. Do not look to forgive me, old man, because it is you who brought us here. Was it worth it? That is a coward's question, Lorath. It suits you.
He calls Lorath a coward. Was it worth it? In his eyes, yes. What has Lorath done all of this time? Nothing. He had no plan. He was sitting somewhere in the wilderness with a bottle of alcohol and probably lost all hope. Can you blame him? Right now, we humans are insects compared to the power of hell. What chance is there of survival? Elias turned to Lilith because, as far as I know, she loves her children and wants to save them by any means necessary. However, Lilith is still a demon. Even if she is the creator and mother of Sanctuary, her view is twisted. And yet Elias saw her as his only hope, as a leader. When the world was on the brink of an abyss, he acted and he made the tough decisions that no other person did. And in his circumstances, it may be the only solution left. Neither of them could predict that a player with massive amount of plot armor just so happens to stumble around to solve everything in the end. No matter how crazy the scenario gets, Elias never gave up fighting, and he should be respected for that. Lorath has no right to criticize him. He waited like a coward and gave in to hopelessness when the world needed a solution the most. A very strong conversation, but too bad that they didn't pursue the world building around the empowerment factor more. The idea of achieving a balance between demons and angelic essence would have been interesting in the system and gameplay. So you could keep your character in line but also push towards one faction. If you go more demonic, the skills of the great evils become available in the skill tree. It would also be cool if this would change your appearance. On the other hand, you could choose to gain more angelic powers and turn into an angel, or at least partially. So let's see where this could lead. If you are already using these two essences as a foundation stone, why not add other elements? I'm not suggesting boring ones like fire, water, air and so on, but specific ones that exist in Sanctuary. For example, Elden Ring has Scarlet Rot, Blood Loss, Frostbite, Madness and Death Blight. So why not go for effects that influence the whole map in certain areas and are a bit twisted and corrupted? Or perhaps something pure, a paradise hidden by a group so that it's not discovered, exploited and destroyed by the outside world. Just take a look at the Diablo 4 map and compare it to Elden Ring. In Elden Ring, they knew exactly where to place each unique ecosystem to make it stand out and enhance the world. In Diablo, they simply drew an oval, here, and maybe here a line. You could put the desert there, the swamp there, and I guess it's cold in this region. That's it. A little exaggerated, of course, but the map looks like they just drew a few lines and then assigned biomes to the boxes. More biomes with different dangers that change not only enemies but also the ground you are standing on would be the first step. Elden Ring knew how to design their map. I'm not qualified to do so. However, a great map is essential if you want the player to explore the open world. Whatever that abomination of a map is, it demonstrates that Blizzard never placed much focus on world building from the start. Darkness, which originally only drained mana, is very deadly if you evolve it into a Malthael-like death essence, for example. Over the season, Blizzard could slowly change the map to prepare for a seasonal event. For example, let's go with Malthael's Essence, or From Darkness into Malthael's Essence. The ghosts and remnants of Malthael's death essence would slowly spread like a virus, and we need to investigate this anomaly. I have no idea what happened to Malthael's body after the third game, but maybe it still exists somewhere or maybe not. He died in the Pandemonium Fortress, if I remember correctly, a place he turned into his domain. So I could imagine for a big seasonal event where Death Essence leaks faintly from the fortress to a special place in Sanctuary. Ghosts or Reapers use this weakness to slip through the reality to gain access to the human world and harvest their souls. Blizzard would need to work out what exactly they want to achieve with this, but we ignore that in this video. However, I suggest developing that event eventually into a raid. Slowly building it up over the year and then finishing it with a big raid would be awesome. But let's continue with the various elements and essence to not lose track. How about an element specifically developed by mankind to fight demons? An element like that could be common in strongholds and lands that suffer from permanent invasion but don't get reinforcement from the Church of Light. Those regions might also dislike angels because they only see how the Church left them to die. Compared to demonic and angelic essence, other elements should not affect the entire skill tree, but maybe could be placed specifically on one ability as kind of an upgrade. Whether that's a good idea, I don't know. It just comes from a world building perspective. Someone like Asmongold or Darth Microtransactions could give a better answer. Does anyone remember Donan? You know, the guy who died spectacularly on some pillar. It was unexpected, I give them that, but I don't really understand why he had to die there. So I have another idea. What if, after his son's death, he secretly investigates how to gain power and comes across Lilith experiments that we talked about a lot previously. Throughout the story, his behavior changes until he completely succumbs to revenge. In his quest for power, he misunderstands the experiment and that you need a balance between the essence, turning him into something like a hybrid demon. Vengeance consumes him, and in the end, we have to confront our friend as instincts completely take over his perception. If written correctly, this could be some tragedy. If the story had gone in a different direction and we had joined Lilith, an emotional battle with Donan would have been inevitable. We realize that Lilith is the only option for salvation and join her, for example, which makes Donan feel betrayed. No matter what we say in the end, he would never forgive us, following his son's murder and die by our hands in this confrontation. We don't necessarily need to fight him on Lilith's side. He could also just fall into a tragedy and we have to stop him before he completely destroys what we care about. In general, I think it's a shame that no demons try to deceive us with words. It would be a completely normal evolutionary step. Lilith wants to empower humans. Why shouldn't there be demons with similar goals and others who only pretend to deceive us to eat humans quietly at night? Now let's turn our attention to the Nightmare Dungeons. There are 120 of those old runes? Making each one unique is probably almost impossible. After all, 20 ice caves will just look like 20 ice caves. Of course, one could be a frozen castle, the next could be Antarctica, the next could be tower made of ice, but at some point you run out of options, especially when you have only a few biomes. I would argue that Blizzard used a quantitative system, so we have to find and develop a system that turns quantity into quality. That's obviously easier said than done. But if elements could already influence the world, the same could apply to dungeons, so angels and demons could have their own dungeons and be hidden as cults in Sanctuary. Perhaps one of those places could be Laboratory. Both factions originally belonged to Lilith and were the result of those experiments to create a Nephilim. It's only natural that humans with demon-like mutation unite under Lilith, while the angels split to form and pursue their own ideology, which is similar to Lilith, but at the same time does not accept a full-blooded demon as a ruler. Their idea would also be to empower the human race to repel invasions of the greater evils. However, unlike Lilith, they would probably rather turn the human race into angels and come into conflict with Lilith. They may even become aware of the player's power and see him as a holy figure who will lead humanity into a golden future. However, I think they don't necessarily hate humans and their demonic side. After all, they were humans. But there's always the exception, and people in Sanctuary already feel resentment towards demons. Some of those angel-turned humans may even hate humans for their demon-tainted blood, while others don't. It could lead to a conflict within where we have to intervene to prevent them from destroying each other completely, and also from being a danger to humanity and weakening us even further before their invasion. As already mentioned, other elements such as Wrath, Dead and what else you can think of could corrupt the lands and have an influence on the dungeons as well. This would give you more variety and more freedom in terms of seasons and stories. For crafting the Nightmare dungeons you could also use a fusion function. This means combining 2 or 3 elements to create unique dungeons. Depending which elements you use, it could also influence the monsters, and you have countless combinations. But if we already talk about this, having angelic and demonic essence combining with elemental essence could also open up a kind of monster crafting system. Of course, the standard dungeons should not be forgotten. Castles, sect-like constructs, normal caves, laboratories, or perhaps other dimensions or rifts where the dungeons are living organisms and see us as their prey. Like living creatures and parasite dungeons could also fight among themselves. Here, Blizzard could let their creativity run wild, doing stuff they've never done before. Imagine you are about to complete a dungeon when suddenly the entire structure erupts as fangs tear the tunnel apart. It then turns out that another dungeon is attacking the dungeon we just cleared and tries to consume it. Maybe it would have been a great idea to build massive dungeons that functions like their own ecosystem, similar to the underground of Elden Ring, with new areas, new enemies and great lore. That would be crazy. A secret dungeon could also house the characters of top players that you have to fight your way through. The possibilities would be endless. Of course, I don't know if this is technically feasible. Presumably, a lot of monsters would have to get different skins depending on their elements and fusion, but that wasn't the point of this video. I just think it's a shame that Diablo 4 didn't explore this direction further. I would love to work with studios on world building and storytelling, something like this, but it's probably never going to happen. For now at least. I'm still not good enough as a writer to actually construct great stories. Diablo 4 needs different endings because no faction is truly evil. I would love to play in each one of them. I would have loved if we could join Lilith's faction. The final boss, maybe even turn Inarius into a final boss, and we need to slay him in order to prove our loyalty. We could also take Inarius' position after he dies and try to reform Church into a power that can and will defeat Hell. However, since I couldn't think of a way to create a DLC that works with multiple endings, I decided against rewriting the story. The boss fight against Lilith looks good. Unfortunately, it feels like the developers threw the final boss in at the last minute when the studio realized there was no final fight. And that's just a lot of wasted potential, and fighting Lilith at her weakest point just feels unspectacular. There's no way. That was especially true for me because I was overleveled. How am I emotionally invested in the story when I'm overleveled? The game just punished me for exploring. It's an open world game, and compared to Skyrim or Elden Ring, there isn't much to explore. Everything looks and feels the same. The map doesn't help either. Diablo is a beautiful, cruel world, but it still has so much unused potential. It's insane. At the moment I won't buy the DLC, but that may change in the future. The potential is there, and Blizzard could still turn Diablo 4 into a great game with world building alone. I hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe you would like to share your ideas in the comments. What do you think would be cool? What do you think wouldn't work at all? And what would you like to see in the future? For example, I would love enormous underground dungeons similar to the underground in Elden Ring. But I'm just a dude who doesn't even play the game anymore. So what would I know?